listening to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something, people. I had mentioned this in another show. When I got out of the hospital, I got on a new heart medicine called Metropolol. And I looked it up, and one of the side effects is bad dreams. And last night, I had probably one of the worst dreams I've had in years. I was in a hospital room with a past guest of mine, an older gentleman, an actor named Tony Amandolo, and some guy came into the room and threw a ball at me. And I was like, what are you doing? And then he came after me with a cane, and that's when I woke up, and I smacked like 3 things off my nightstand, and I was terrified. Of course, Joanne slept through it, but hey, these dreams, they're getting crazy. I have to talk to the doctor. Anyway, we have a great show today. We have a gentleman who's been in the business a long time. He's a great guitarist, was in a very influential band back in the day. He's got a solo career. He's got a book, and my guest is Richard Lloyd. How you doing, Richard?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you.
I have had nothing but good dreams in the last couple of years.
Now,
I haven't had a nightmare for decades now.
Now, do you remember your last nightmare?
No, I don't. I remember nightmares. I don't remember dreams, as a matter of fact. They're pretty flimsy, and when you wake up, they kind of get dispersed.
Right.
And then when I do remember a dream, I'll remember it for a couple of hours, and then it'll vanish.
Well, that's like an idea. You know, when you wake up and they always say write it down, and you don't, and you say, oh, I'm going to remember this, and you wake up the next morning, you're like, shit, I didn't write it down.
Yeah, I had a dream that I was in a bar, and somebody put the jukebox on, and there was a song playing, and it was really good. And as I woke up, I realized that it was nobody's song. It was, just an invention in the dream. So I woke up, and I went over and got my guitar, and I hit a note to try to find a note that was in the song, and I hit a wrong note, and the whole dream vanished. Right? So it's the song that got away.
Yeah, exactly. And if it ever comes back to you, that's what you can call it, the song that got away.
Something like that, yeah.
So you play guitar. When did you start playing guitar? I believe it was when you saw the Beatles that turned you on to music?
Well, I have a musical influence through my whole life from when I was 2 years old, and we had a little piano where I was living, and I could play single notes. That was fine. I could play 2 notes, and they always in their intervals. They always sounded good together, but 3 notes could sound good or not good. I asked my caretakers if they could teach me the piano, and they were like, "Oh no, we can't play the piano, Richard." And so I asked for lessons, and we were dirt poor in in Pittsburgh, a suburb of Pittsburgh called Homestead. That's now like a ghost town. And in any case, piano lessons. So I just hacked around on this little miniature piano that was strangely enough in tune. I was lucky there until I, virtually destroyed it. Playing it with my fists and punching it and stuff. Then I stole my stepfather had a ukulele from when he was in the Air Force, and I used to purloin that in the middle of the night and play it with a guitar, as a guitar, not as a ukulele. I didn't use it comes with a giant felt pick I couldn't stand. I would use a quarter or some other coin as a plectrum, as a guitar pick. And so this went on, and I played drums. That's the first musical instrument that I had that I owned. My parents got me a drum set. It took them like 3 years. My birthday, I would get a snare. Christmas would come, I'd get a cymbal. Went like that till I had a whole set. And as soon as I had a whole set, I switched to guitar.
Yeah. So what made you switch to guitar?
Not exactly as soon as, but, I still have a kit. I don't play it. I haven't played it in a long time. But I took drum lessons. I can read drum nomenclature.
Now, since you played the drums and you took lessons and you started, pounding around on the piano when you were very young, how was the transition to guitar? Did you think that you had to read music right away, or did you just start playing, or how was your transition? Was it easy?
I still can't read music very well. I think that the invention of written music, it goes hand in hand with the structure of the piano. And as I didn't play the piano, you're playing a stringed instrument. You're in touch with the vibrating strings. It's a completely different animal. And the written language of music, which is based in C on the piano, and all has a million rules to it. It's not my forte. That's why they invented tablature for the guitar, because it's almost impossible to write guitar lines out in staff music. That is to say, ordinary written music. I'm very slow at reading music. The old joke is, how do you stop a guitarist from playing? Put written music in front of him.
Right.
Well, that's kind of me.
So but now, how did you teach yourself? Did you have any influences that you wanted to play like?
Well, I was a very lucky boy. I lived in Greenwich Village during my formative years, and went to concerts and saw great guitarists very close, and that was really an inspiration. Yes, the Beatles. I saw the Beatles when they first played Ed Sullivan, and it was the energy they generated in the world was like a world war, all generated by these four guys singing basically, love songs, and with all the titles in first and second person. I love me do. She loves you. I want to hold your hand. All very like the beginning readers. John sees the ball. John throws the ball. John has a dog. The dog catches the ball. That kind of kindergarten readings.
Right.
Books that we have.
Yeah.
John and Jill.
Yeah, they were very basic, but they told a story.
Exactly, and that was the Beatles. And I wondered what was making them have the influence that they had. And it was a couple years later, the guitar started coming into its own in rock music or popular music, and I realized it was the guitar that really made a difference. It was like the magical wand was a guitar. So I wanted to play that. Plus, I had a experience. I guess you call it a spiritual experience. I was playing the drums, and everything was very colorful, and so the color went out of the drums, and it went to grayscale, black and white, and the cymbals sounded like cardboard, and the drums, just lost their luster. And I had an audio hallucination of a voice that told me, you need to play a melody instrument. And of course I had secretly wanted to play guitar for a long time. So that was my cue to pick it up.
Well, when you picked it up, I just read something, you met a guy named in Brooklyn named Velvet Turner.
Velvet, like velvet, the cloth with an R in front of the T. Velvet Turner, yeah. He had apparently been watching TV and saw Jimi Hendrix very early on, and started jumping up and down, saying, "This is according to his mom." You know, I somehow I know that guy. I got to meet him. You know, and he did. And Jimi Hendrix took him under his wing as a kind of mentor protege thing, and taught him the guitar. And he lived a couple blocks from. Jimmy had an apartment that was close to where I lived in Greenwich Village, so Velvet would go over there. And then when he left Jimmy's place, he'd come over to my place a lot of times, and we would play on my guitar, passing it back and forth, playing, you know, basically the Jimi Hendrix first couple records of stuff. That's what he was teaching Velvet.
So you're learning the guitar now. What do you think you want to do with this when you were learning it? Did you know you wanted to just be a musician?
The toppermost of the poppermost, of course.
So how do you do that? I know, didn't you go to Boston for a little bit?
Oh, you're talking about my tramp years. You know, when you tramp around in when I left home, a lot of my friends went to Boston to go to music school or school in general. So I went up there and I lived there for almost 2 years, and then I went to LA and I lived there for like 2 years, and then I came back to New York and knew that something was going to happen, and of course it did, and I knew all about it before it happened, but that's just another, might be a delusion of mine.
Well, tell me about that. I want to hear that.
Well, I just knew that something was going to happen, and that I was going to be involved, you know, and the guitar was going to be involved, obviously. I was going to form a band or be in a band or something that would have an impact on rock history. And as it happened, that's really what happened with the band Television and the club CBGBs.
Right, now...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, with Television and that whole scene in CBGB, you know, you knew it was going to happen. How did it happen? What were your steps? And when you had the feeling it's going to happen, and as you say, it did happen. How did it get from that point of you feeling it to it happening?
Well, let's see. We were rehearsing down in Chinatown, where our manager, Terry Ork, had a loft, and we rehearsed there. And to get there, you had to go down the Bowery. And one day we were looking for a place basically that we could take over and be the house band.
Television.
You know? Yeah, Television. Because we had to rent our own little theater or whatever, put on our own shows, and it was terribly difficult. We wanted a bar, you know, where we could play, you know, regularly. And so Tom Verlaine, Nee Miller, came to the rehearsal one day and said, "I may have seen the place. You know, there's a place," and the guy was, you know, putting up the awning. So it's a new place. You want to go up with me and talk to him? Maybe he's going to have live music and we could play there. So I went up with Tom, and when we got to this place, you looked up and there was this sign, CBGB's and Unplug. And he was up on a stepladder repairing something. And we said, while he was Hilly, Crystal was the guy's name. And we said, "Hey, you going to have live music?" And he said, "Yep. See, what CBGB's stands for Country, Bluegrass, and Blues." So we said, "Well, we play a little country-esque. It's rock." You know, he said, "Well, I'm not going to have rock music." We said, "But it's not loud, and it's like nothing you've ever heard before." And so he says, I don't know about that. The next day I went up again to CBGB's with Terry Ork, our manager, who promised the bar tab to be, in other words, he said to Hilly, "Let this band play on your worst night. You know, give us your worst night." It turned out to be a Sunday, of course, and sometimes he didn't even open on Sunday. a bar on the Bowery, just in under a flop house. So anyway, he gave us this Sunday because Terry York promised him that he was going to invite all alcoholics. And so the bar, Hilly would make money at the bar, which he did. And our music was so, out of the box, as it were. He didn't know what to do with us, but Terry began putting us in there, every couple weeks. So we now had a regular place to play where basically we invented it. Before we got there was nobody at the door taking any money. We put that in for the band. I think it was $2 to come in, and you could come in all night. And he had a couple of acts play in there, a number of bands and different, bluegrass, really seriously in Manhattan. You're not going to get too big an audience for banjo music, But I guess people started hearing about this place where we were playing, and we made rules such as you had to play original music, no covers, because we had, you can go into any city and you can find cover bands. It's really big now to be a cover band that only covers one band.
Right.
So you get a Tom Petty night or something, and you get a Rolling Stones evening, and a band will call themselves something like, Brown Sugar.
Right.
And then play nothing but Rolling Stones songs. But the rules at CBGB's were the opposite. We didn't have a cover band. You couldn't get a spot. And I think pretty close on our heels came a number of other bands, Talking Heads, Blondie, wasn't Blondie yet, but it was, what was the name of them? There was the Three Girls. It was kind of like a doo-wop thing. And they played. And there was some strange band called Secret Leather, Leather Secrets, that did this kind of S&M, black leather, doing sort of Velvet Underground-y kind of stuff. But it was original. And the girl in the front was like this black leather wearing with a whip. And she would whip the stage while she sang and stuff like that. Then eventually, and the way we had it structured, you would only have two bands play, and they would each play two sets all night. And, these were 45-minute or 50-minute sets. And so, for instance, we played a lot Talking Heads opening for us. But Talking Heads would play, then Television would play, then Talking Heads would play again, and then Television would play again. So Talking Heads would get the third slot, which is all, prime time.
Right.
So it kind of diffused. We got that idea from the double feature, the movie. Terry was really into movies. When he would take a day off, he'd spend it in Times Square going to movies from, noon till midnight. And anyway, we got that idea from the double feature, the movies, and there was only two bands. That allowed us to play more often. And we began doing Saturdays, Fridays and Saturday, and then Saturday and Sunday, and finally, at one point we were doing 4 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we would have different bands play with us. And Ramones showed up, and Blondie formed itself, and there were a bunch of other bands that came in, and they were all good and all very, very different. That was the other thing. Talking Heads was not like Blondie. which was not like television, which was not like Ramones. And so we had all these different sort of the menu had a real quality to it.
Now,
and, yeah, go ahead.
no, you keep, your band was television. You guys had, you started at CBGB. How did you guys meet? How did television start?
Television started because I was in New York. I'd come back. I'd heard about the Mercer Arts Center and the New York Dolls, and that there was a scene in New York, and I was in L.A. So I said to myself, or it was said to me, there's a scene in New York. This is going to probably be it, what I've been waiting for. So I got a ride to New York from L.A. in a fancy car, a Lotus Europa, and we drove across the U.S. And while we were driving across the U.S., the Mercer Arts Center fell down. So there went the scene. So there I was in New York and trying to find a place, that would be the scene. And I found out that everybody hung out at Max's Kansas City, so I went there, and there was something called the back room, which was, always full of the hippest, the modest, the most whatever. I was frequented by Andy Warhol's people, and rock people, and journalists, and movie makers, and artists, etc. So then I met Terry Ork there, and he had an extra room in his loft, and I moved into it. And then one day he said, I know a guy who does what you do. And I said, what the hell does that mean? Does what I do. What do I do, Terry? You tell me. He said, well, you play guitar on your own by yourself, and this guy's doing us like 3 songs at an audition night at a place called Reno Sweeney's, and maybe you want to go see him. And I said, well, why would I want to see somebody who's doing what I'm already doing?
Right.
This takes time out from me doing it. The day came of this event, and it turned out to be Tom Miller, Neighbor Lane, at Reno Sweeney's playing 3 songs on electric guitar with a little amp on a chair. And while he was playing his songs, it came to me that he was good. He was very good, but he was missing something important. And I realized that what he was missing, I had. And, I'm not so egotistical to think that I was a complete package, too. So I realized I was missing something, and what I was missing, he kind of had the bases covered on. So I told Terry, I said, look, he was going to put together a band under my name. And I said, well, forget about that, and put this guy and me in a band, and you'll have something that'll make history. Terry wanted to manage a band and create a scene based kind of on envy of Warhol's relationship to the Velvet Underground and the Flying Electric Circus or whatever it was. So Terry let us, basically bought equipment and let us gigs for us. And that was really how it all started. And so Tom came down to the loft, and we swapped the guitar back and forth. And then he brought Richard Myers, Richard Hell, with him. And then we did that for a while, and then they went off and whispered to each other. And then they came back and said, yeah, let's try it, a band thing. So then we had me and Tom. We needed a bass player and a drummer. So we talked Richard into playing bass with us. He had done it previously with the Neon Boys, which had been a trio. I had no idea they had done this Neon Boys thing and cut a 45, and self-published it, which was extraordinarily rare in those days. Everybody was waiting for, the big opportunity to get discovered, to become a star, blah, 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 whoop, whoop. And we weren't about that. I mean, sure, we wanted to get signed, because we wanted to make our music under the most optimum conditions, and record labels had the money and the support, and they could get their records into stores, etc. But we weren't afraid of doing it ourselves. So we made our own single, which was Little Johnny Jewel. The song was too long as a one side of a 45 record, so we split it in half, parts 1 and 2, and we took that that was Tom's idea, from James Brown doing Hot Pants, part 1 and part 2, or, I can't remember the other ones, but he would often do that, a long song on two sides of a 45. So we did that, and the strangest thing happened. We got reviewed in a tiny little review in Penthouse, the men's magazine.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all these orders came in, like in shopping bags, of people who were sending $2 in for this single. And we would send it out, we would have a band meeting, and instead of rehearsing, we would sit around and put up, take the cardboard, 45 size cardboards, and put the record in between the cardboards, and then address it, and it was all done by hand. We were our own record company until we got signed by Elektra. And there were a lot of other companies who, came sniffing around, but none of them wanted. Well, Seymour Stein of Sire Records, who signed the Ramones, and who else did he sign? He signed a whole bunch of Talking Heads to Sire, and he was terribly interested in signing television, but we said no. We weren't interested in him because his budgets for the first records were so low. We needed a good budget to make a good record. We didn't want to make a record, in 2 days on the fly. So we just put it off and waited until when we got the deal we wanted to get. And Elektra was a great label. It had the Doors, Love, Tim Buckley. It was very much an artist's label. So when they wanted to sign us, we were, happy.
Now, did you get did they know about you because of your days at the CBGB?
Yeah, I was playing CBGBs that, eventually a year went by and we started to fill the place up and pack the place whenever we played there. And it took a year and a half to get people in suits to even think about coming down to the Bowery to listen to a band in a crummy little bar, that with bums lying on the street in front of the place, because upstairs was a flop house where down and out alcoholic bums could get a bed for a night. It wasn't even a hotel. It was like a dormitory. And I think it was $1.65 to stay there for one night, and people would fall asleep on the stairs or pass out, I should say, rather, or in front of CBGBs, you'd have to step over them. And people thought that was dangerous, and, they didn't want to get their feet wet in urine.
Yeah. Now,
Bum urine.
now, when you started packing CBGB, what kind of crowd were you bringing in, and why were those people taking the trek in the bad area just because they heard you guys were special?
Yeah, that's about the size of it. The audience was surprisingly creative, though. It was very much like the Junior Maxes in terms of the crowd. We got photographers. Obviously, you see that scene got photographed in an incredible amount. All the bands and all the photographers. And then we got journalists who came down who wanted to write about this scene. We got, other musicians who would come and want to start to play there. And, it just went like that. We had artists, painters, and regular audience members. But the idea was that, everybody was talented. The audience, too.
Okay. Well, now, you said Elektra signed you. Now, when they signed you, how long did they give you to make Marquee Moon? Did they sit there and go, here's the time frame?
Oh, no, they didn't do that. It's all a collaborative effort, as it were. It took us, 6 weeks. 2 weeks to record the basics, 2 weeks for overdubs, and 2 weeks for mixing. That was how most records were done back then, in a 6-week period.
Now,
so that was the structure we used.
Now, the record comes out, and what's people's reaction to it when it comes out? Because you already had a fan base, because people were coming to see you live. How was the reaction to the record?
There was also a bunch of journalists from England who were foreign correspondents who had been writing about CBGBs and the scene developing there for 2 years before we got over there and our record came out, and it got on the cover of all their music magazines as a masterpiece and blah blah blah. I don't know what Rolling Stone did to it. I don't remember. In the United States, it wasn't as pronounced a success, and it was one of those records that it said, it's not that everybody bought it, but everybody that did buy it became a band member. They all picked up their guitars. Well, we can try this,
What do you think made it such a special album? Because, if you read, people say it's one of the top 10 debuts ever. It falls in lists as one of the top 100 albums. It's a very critically acclaimed album. What do you, as someone who is involved in it, what do you think made it so special?
Oh, well, we were dedicated, that's for sure. We wanted this vision to be transmitted. There was Atlantic Records at one point. Jerry Wexler wanted to sign us. He was a big A&R guy. And their company was run by Ahmet Ertegun. And we did an audition for them. And I went to the bathroom. So we took a break. And I passed the control room where they were listening to the music. And I overheard Ahmet Ertegun say to Jerry, I can't sign this band. This is not ice music. So there was something other planetly about the band. I mean, and the record is, I guess it's one of those debut records that can't be overcome, like Are You Experienced or The Doors, or Love, or their first record. It's such a benchmark that it just is.
So when you have a benchmark and you do that, how is it going into the studio for when you recorded Adventure? I mean, was it something that you guys, you seemed very original, so you seemed like you probably don't want to do the same thing. What was it like when you went in the studio for that?
Well, we had a different engineer. The record sounds completely different. But the problem for me was that in Marquee Moon, we had our set. You know, we had a whole slew of songs that we've been playing for 3 or 4 years. And so we had those to pick from to put on the record. When we got to a second record that we could have continued to take our stuff that we played out live and, made another great second record. But Tom wanted to write in wanted to write in the studio, so he was starting to not come up with lyrical ideas and not coming up with complete songs at all. And so he was the lyricist, hang on for the ride. It was basically like, well, we'll make the record super quick, and then Tom can take 6 months messing around with it till he gets something he likes, and vocals and etc. So it was, in a way, it was a kind of a disappointment to me personally. But it almost didn't matter because we had Marquee Moon. Nobody can, it's an undeniable fact. It's like living proof of something.
Right.
And if we'd never made another record, it wouldn't have mattered.
Now, what led to your guys' breakup after the second album? Was it something that just Marquee Moon was so big, you weren't really sure what direction you wanted to go into? I mean, why'd you guys break up?
No, I think Tom especially wanted more of the money, and he didn't especially like the freedom that the band members had in television. He's a very controlling person, and I think he verges on paranoia in terms of that control. And Billy Ficca, our drummer, would contribute his own ideas, and I would contribute my own. But he didn't like having to have anybody else have any say in the band. So it was easier for him to just leave the band and take all the money for the next record himself, which then I did too, because we were all four signed separately and collectively to Elektra. So, I said, Tom, I've been thinking about leaving anyway. Why don't we just call it a day, and we'll tell people, that we have to go back to our home planet, and we'll come back, maybe when the sun cycle is over, 11 and a half. What is it? The Saros cycle, the sunspots,
yeah,
or the eclipse.
Right.
I think it's an 18-year cycle, or an 11. Well, the sunspots are an 11-year cycle. So anyway, that was our kind of playful way of diluting this really traumatic breakup, and I think it came as a shock to Fred and Bill that the band was going to dissolve. But Tom wanted to go his own way and be the big kahuna, and so he did. And he made a slew of solo records. And it's not music I was listening to, his solo stuff. But then again, he's got a lot of fans, and he has something special. But then as far as drummers go, so does Billy Ficca. And he's one of the great drummers, unheralded, musicians in the rock genre, and fabulous drummer. So, and great bass player. So we had all the bases covered, but Tom wanted to basically play with a guy who would play like a drum machine.
Okay. So, one question. How did you get the name Television?
Richard Hell came up with that. We sat down and we called ourselves Goo Goo for the first 3 weeks till everybody was supposed to go away and come back with suggestions. And Richard showed up with a piece of typewritten paper with a bunch of names on it, but then he had television surrounded by typewritten stars and plugged away for that. I think he convinced Tom based on the initials TV, Tom Verlaine. Ha ha ha. It was also telling a vision, but what we really wanted was a word that was the same in all languages. So I don't know what you call a television in Russia, but the television is television.
So you had So now when you guys broke up, you went out and started recording solo. Now, what was that like for you? Because you'd worked with a band for a long time, but you knew you had something special. What was it like when you first went into the studio to record your first solo album?
Well, I had a bunch of songs I'd written during the course of television that were not suitable for television songs, so it wasn't that hard for me to, come up with material. They made me do some demos, and I had to do 2 demos. The first one got rejected, and then we did another one, and I had a great A&R person who really fought for me, Maxanne Sartori, R.I.P., rest in peace, and she really believed in me. So we went in and made Alchemy. One thing she said was that her big rule was no drugs, and of course, by this time I was completely addicted to a number of different substances, but I wasn't about to tell her. And so anyway, we went in and we made Alchemy, and then that was going to be a big deal until they had a business meeting where they were going to hook me up with some big management firm, and I got too stoned. I should have not gone. Should have said I have stomach illness, I can't show up, or I got diarrhea or something. But I went to the meeting and proceeded to nod out. And famous last act of an artist that, it's a famous story, really. Anyway, the next time I went to Elektra, my poster was gone off the wall, and they couldn't get them on the phone, and they kind of dumped me then. So Alchemy didn't do as well as it could have.
So that happens.
It's still thought of as a great record in the term, and one of the forebears of what they call pop, power pop or rock pop.
So it didn't Elektra dumped you. So then what are you going to do now? I mean, you don't have a record company. You have songs. Are you still doing drugs, or did you learn that after Elektra dumped you?
I went through the haze of drugs. I got straight in basically in 80, 81, 82, 83 were the nadir of my life. That the down period where I was really I was hooked, and I was a junkie. And took a long time for me to pull out of that nosedive, and I did in middle of '84. I got straight, and I immediately got a record deal with a Swedish company who I had a friend go over to Sweden, and he called me from there and said, there's a guy over here who has a record company, wants you to make a record for him. I was like, oh, really? He said, yeah, and he wants you to, I said, well, when does he want this? He says, as soon as you can get your papers together. And that became Field of Fire, which was recorded in Sweden.
So you recorded that, and then you recorded another CD after that. Now, also, you guys...
I'm sorry, but there was 5 years, 6 years between the two. One came out in 79, Alchemy, 85. How many years is that? I can't count.
6. Yes, 6.
This is about 6 years. So it was 6 years between records for me that time.
Now, in '92, Television recorded another album. How did that come about? How did you guys get back together?
Oh, gee whiz. My manager at the time and Tom's manager at the time met each other at a party and casually asked, well, what's Tom doing? And his manager says, not much. And he said, well, what's Richard doing? And my manager said the same thing, not much. So they said, well, let's try to get them to see if they want to do something together again. So we reformed Television to do a third record, and we had a bidding war for that record. One of the, 23 record companies wanted to sign us. We went with Capitol, who had the Beatles, and that was still a third of their income, I think, the Beatles. Still is, I'm sure.
Right.
Like Frank Sinatra and RCA, just perennial sellers. In any case, we put Television back together. We did this record for Capitol, and as soon as it came out, Capitol underwent a restructuring. And everybody that had signed us and everybody that liked the record and everybody was going to work on it suddenly weren't working for the company anymore, and they were like new people who didn't understand us at all. And basically, that record didn't break out of the box in terms of radio. When Marquee Moon came out, we said, what are we going to do about radio? You're not we're not really a singles band. And they said, well, I don't know what we're going to do with radio. And we said, well, why don't you send it out to college radio stations? Because they have open-ended, what do you call those? A list of records they can play. And they said, oh, no, college radio doesn't sell records. And, of course, a couple of years later, college radio exploded.
Right.
So we were ahead of the game there, too. We also said, oh, why don't we make up some, the record company, give us some money, we'll make some T-shirts. It'll be free, it'll be advertising for the record, and it'll also allow us to sell them at shows and make a little extra money. And they were like, we're not in the clothing manufacturer business, we're in the record making business. So there was merchandising.
Right.
That we had thought of. And they went, nah, that doesn't do anything. And then, of course, a couple of years later,
right.
merchandising, was a home run.
Now, after you did the Television, that album in '92, you've gone on to do a few solo albums. What is it like for you to do a solo album? What's the difference? You've had a few of them. Do you feel you're growing?
I I think it's 8 or 9 records now. You know, and I've got a good catalog of songs on those records. And the latest was a Plowboy release. Plowboy's a company in Nashville called, I'm just going to say the title of my book. My brain is washed out. What's the difference? You know, obviously the personnel. Although on Alchemy I used Fred Smith, and so did Tom on his first record called Tom Verlaine, of all things. Anyway, no, what happened after television disbanded the second time? I ended up playing guitar with Matthew Sweet for a couple of years.
Okay.
In between my own stuff, and I did a record with John Doe of X. I did his Meet John Doe, it's called. I was played in it with him for a while. And, you know, as a session guitarist, did a number of sessions and stuff. I'm on like 10 Matthew Sweet albums.
Okay, Matthew's been on the show.
Matthew's been on the show, yeah, he's a great guy.
So, I know, I think recently, you still perform. I think you recently played, I think it was you, at Randy Now's Man Cave in Bordentown.
Oh, God, yeah. What a weird place. A little one. A little record store. It was a lot of fun.
I saw Graham Parker there.
Did you?
Yeah. Now,
Great.
Now,
was he good?
What's that?
Was Graham good?
Yeah, I went both nights. I went both nights because he had done my show like 2 weeks before. So put me on the list, and it was good because he told stories. Of course, the second night, the mic blew out. I think it was because Randy's mic is so. I mean, the amp blew out, so he had to do the rest of the show acoustic. Now, tell me about your book.
In terms of what?
You wrote a book.
Yeah, I wrote an autobiography, basically, a memoir.
Now, what made you decide to do that?
Well, I had decided to do that many years ago. But, you know, I didn't have the opportunity to write a book. I had no publisher. And I got something... When the computers came, you know, everybody started to have to type again.
Right.
And I can't stand typing. So I went out and I bought voice recognition software, which was just starting to be good. And it's terrific now. It's the basis of all of these, you know, speak-to-type kind of programs that you can have. Well, anyway, I started talking my stories into this program, and I ended up with like, it would have been like 600 or 800 pages of various rock stories. I thought I would do a book of vignettes, little shards, little pieces of like this event or that event that I went through in my life. It's also a kind of confessional. You know, writing an autobiography you got to be careful with your ego and be honest. And so there's the good of me and the bad of me in the book. It's called Everything Is Combustible, and you can get it at Barnes and Nobles, or you should be able to get it at local music store. And if not, ask for it, for God's sakes.
And you can get it from your website. If you link, it branches off to another website.
Yeah, you can get it from, I think that goes directly to the publisher.
Yeah.
It's a small company in Maine.
Now, what are you up to these days? Are you still playing? Are you still writing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I rehearsed with some people yesterday. As a matter of fact, we're going to hit the boards again on Monday. And see what happens. You know, I do sporadic shows. and I intend to continue that. I know I'm booked in Spain early next year, so that's in the works. Put some stuff around that. Well, we'll see.
Well, that's awesome, man. You know, I'm glad you took the time to talk to me because you're such a part of history. And the other day I was down at the beach, and my fiance likes to lay out on the beach. I don't. I always walk on the beach. And I listened to Marquee Moon when I took a walk, and it's really good. It's really good, like to walk to. It's one of those songs, one of those albums that is just nice on the beach as I was walking. I just really enjoyed it.
Great. I'm glad to hear that.
So, yes, I want to thank you. Now, your website is Richard Lloyd, people, that's with two L's, richardlloyd.com. And are you in any other kind of...
That's the one I haven't used in centuries. It's there, but it's old.
Okay.
And I don't produce... You could go to everythingiscombustible.com. And you'll see. Oh, they all connect with one another. So go, what the heck? Go to richardlloyd.com and follow the little magic footsteps to other places.
Well, that's awesome, man. I want to thank you. So, people, please go buy the book. Listen to Marquee Moon. Listen to his solo stuff. You can find all that stuff. And now's a time where new music's not as good as it used to be. So you got to listen to the old stuff. So go back. And so people, check out Richard Lloyd. Check out my website, people. It's coopertalk.net. You can find 730 episodes up there. Email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Right. Twitter @coopertalk. And I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Thank you.